The avoidance of accountability is one of the most dangerous dysfunctions because it is silent. It's when you accept lower standards to happen. Any moment you accept a lower standard of excellence, you are giving in to mediocrity. You are establishing a culture of mediocrity.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
Let's dive in. I know some of you, wow, it's been a while since I've been here. This is great. It's great to be back. Those of you who have been anxiously awaiting my report on my golf performance in Scottsdale, Arizona, I am pleased to announce that it went quite well. Yeah, thank you. It was, I think, the best round of golf that I've ever played in my entire life. Which is interesting because I didn't even use some of those of you who didn't hear the last time I talked, I was talking about going on this trip and anxiety about having to play golf. And I think I talked about my inner childhood with my dad. And we did like a last minute golf lesson. But interestingly enough, I rented clubs. And now this was at TPC Scottsdale. It's a pretty nice course. And that's coming from a guy that doesn't really care. And I rented clubs because, I had the pack for the wedding, and then I was going to national parks. And it was really interesting because, the comment my dad made as soon as we started practicing was that my clubs were too short, the ones I played with. And that's because I never got fitted for clubs. And that's because I didn't care. And it's because it's the thing I had to do. And so a friend gave me clubs. Now, he must have given me clubs. We're about a similar height. He must have given me clubs like from when he played in middle school because they just didn't fit appropriately. But it was an interesting lesson in you got to have the right tools. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but you got to have the right tools. And I know that sounds interesting because it's like if you ever saw I think it was like You, Me, and Dupree. Is it Owen Wilson that's in that movie? And he's like, it's not about the bike. He makes a lot of Lance Armstrong references, which that didn't age so well. But he's like, it's not about the bike. It's about the rider, right? It's not about the tool. It's about the person using the tool. But in the case of golf, like the tools are really important. So it was like a good lesson to me that you got to have the right tools. It was also a good lesson in golf is like a really mental game. Jack Nicklaus. I always get him and if you're thinking of the actor in Los Angeles who always is at the Laker games, Jack Nicholson. But Jack Nicklaus, I think, said golf is 90% mental. And what I noticed with golf is that even though it wasn't this thing that I cared about, it is something I wanted to do. I wanted to get better at. I wanted to. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's a part of my professional life now with manufacturers and things like that. But also, my friends enjoy playing it, and I want to have fun while I'm doing it. And what I noticed is I had the wrong tools, and it created this self-fulfilling mental thing where it's I was telling myself I'm not good at this thing, which then obviously created and manifested a truth in that I wasn't. So that's how golf went. And the rest of the trip, I think another lesson I mean, if you have not visited the national parks and the United States is a really big country. It's a big place, and there's just so many beautiful things. I was shocked by how close Zion and Bryce are to one another. I was really excited. I got to go by, there's an animal shelter where Brittany stays and visits when she's out there, best friends. That's in between. And that was great, but they're an hour apart, but they're so wildly different. In terms of what they offer. But it was such a great time. But I think one of my best lessons is we were about a few hours into the trip. Bo, my girlfriend, we met in Phoenix. She flew in from Charlotte, and we went to go hang out with her friends that were all staying at an Airbnb in preparation for this wedding. And, it was Friday and we were about I think almost midway through the month of October, really important month. And these damn things, I tell you, the Pavlovian responses we have to just be on all the time. And when we're away, I think I've always feel this is this is a way that I can still be on and support. And after an acknowledgement of my what's the right way to say that? My lack of being in the moment, my lack of being in the present moment, I was instructed and kindly asked to turn my phone into do not disturb mode, which I then forgot about. When you're scuba diving in Belize or you're on a hike in New Zealand, there's no service. It's really easy because there's no service. But in a moment, in a place where you have it, it was just a great experience for me to like totally dissociate and disconnect. And then I realized maybe some of the stress I had wasn't necessarily because like, oh, if I'm gone, what if everything goes well when I'm gone and then I'm not important and I'm not needed. And what I really realized is like when I'm going away, I probably just don't plan appropriately. I probably don't like make sure that I talk to the right people, make sure I'm doing all the things, make sure the right people know. And I think like, having that dissociation is such a valuable, it was an incredible experience for me. And it's one that I hope that when people take time off, they also get, because I think there was a Future Leaders, I talked about how much I hate waking up Monday morning, and it has nothing to do with working with you all or the work itself. It's just me as a person. And I'm not afraid or ashamed to acknowledge that. But I was like so freaking excited to come into work because I got this like mental rejuvenation and this opportunity to restart. Someone once said, like, when you talk at Future Leaders, I never know where you're going, but you somehow end up tying it all together. So my next point that brings me to this is like a stream of consciousness that I had this week. So then I had to watch Chad's Future Leaders from the last couple of times. And it was very fascinating to me because it was pretty obvious that people weren't paying attention. And in my mind, I'm like, there is literally nothing else that is more important than spending 30 minutes a week on developing our leadership. And then I found myself, like, I think initially like frustrated and angry. And then I started to explore that and unpack that a little bit. And I also acknowledge, like, as a former educator, it's like my principal in Brooklyn, New York, Shahara Jackson, she always told me when I was teaching sixth graders, do not talk to them longer in minutes than they are in years. And I was like, okay, I had like 10 and 11-year-olds. Like, I shouldn't talk for more than 10 minutes at a time without letting them interject or talk or communicate. And judging by the gray in my beard and what I know about how people treat me, and somehow I'm all of a sudden an old person, I know that we can focus for 29 minutes. And even those that are younger than 29 that are on this call, I know that you can push yourself and you can focus for 29 minutes. And I think there's reciprocity in there because it's dependent on me and Chad to make this time valuable, make this time useful. But also I think we recognize that you're showing up to a 30-minute lecture once a week and it's not sustainable. I think like, Chad made a promise that we were going to do this for a year, and we're going to do this for a year. But again, and I know we've talked about this, and as a former educator, it's like, we have to switch things up and make this more immersive. And so I think once we approach the new year and into the new year, the way in which we do Future Leaders will change. I think we'll still have a 30-minute lecture format, probably not weekly, and then offer more sort of instrumental courses that we attend. But I guess my thought when I saw folks like scrolling on their phone and on their computers, it was like, I guess like I can multitask sometimes too. But when something becomes like white noise for you, I just don't think it has the same value for what it is you're trying to do. I've been to a lot of leadership things over the years. I was put in a position where I had to be a leader at a really young age, and some of these things are redundant for me as well. Like some of these I've read this book probably 20 times. And so I think if you're someone who's kind of like struggling with finding things to get out of it, something I always would tell our teachers is like, just try to find one thing you can walk away with every single time. And if you can't do that, then find one thing that you can teach somebody else, whether they're on your team or in your personal life or whatever. So it's like, try to learn something. And if you can't, like, or try to learn something or try to find something that you can teach. Because fascinatingly enough, in the book, because the author Lencioni, he uses stories to talk about these things. That the CTO is on his laptop all the time in meetings. So I just kind of found it like wildly fascinating that the book talks about like this inattentiveness when things are really pertinent. And then I found it really interesting because the topic that Chad was talking about was a lack of commitment. Think about that. It's like how teams fail when people don't fully buy into decisions. Like what, and the reason the teams fail is because there's no clarity or there's no buy-in, right? There's ambiguity. They don't know what's expected of them. They don't know, what the rules are. And then therefore nobody feels comfortable holding each other accountable. Why? Because it feels unfair to call somebody out for something all of a sudden because I didn't truly agree to that in the first place. So I think that's a great, wow, it took me 12 minutes to get there. Great introduction in today's topic, which is like the avoidance of accountability, which I think it's just serendipitous that this one keeps coming up in some way, shape, or form. It's like this fabric that goes through all leadership talk, which is the fourth dysfunction, avoidance of accountability. And so when teams avoid accountability, the standard, it's like the silent killer, like the standards slip quietly. You don't experience it. You don't see it. Nobody argues, but the results slowly fade. And then, people show up a few minutes late. The equipment doesn't get put in the system. The paperwork gets sloppy. The process doesn't get followed. We don't do the debrief or the audit on the ticket. And long before you know it, like mediocrity becomes the norm. Mediocrity becomes the status quo because this thing like just slowly happened glacially, right? It's not like this burst of a firework or a bomb. It's the slow, silent killer when we don't hold each other accountable. So today we're going to break down what that looks like and what it really is, how we should avoid it, or how we can avoid it as leaders, and how strong leaders really create a culture where accountability feels more normal and not confrontational. Because I don't know about you, but when I hear the word accountability, if I were asking sixth graders, do you think that's a negative connotation or a positive connotation? They'd be like, it's a negative. I'm like, yeah, it feels negative. I'm not making that up, by the way. It's like how you do it. Like it's a negative thing. And I think that's because we've created this idea of what accountability is, and it is negative. And really, like, accountability is something I think we have to redefine first and foremost. Accountability, the word, right? It's like we picture like the boss, like yelling at somebody. Like for me, it's interesting. Like whenever I had to take on a different tone, people always said, "Oh, Principal Hasty's coming out." Right? It's the principle. It's like discipline, right? And I don't think that's I don't think that's not what accountability is in the context of what we're talking about in terms of like building strong teams. And when we're talking about accountability, it's less about discipline, like someone getting in trouble. It's less about discipline and it's more about ownership. Right. And I think about our core value, lead ourselves, right? It's not about discipline, it's about ownership. And Lencioni, interesting, he says that he defines accountability as the willingness of team members to remind one another when they are not living up to the performance standards of the group. Think about that. It's the willingness of team members to remind one another when they are not living up to the performance standards of the group. It doesn't say when the boss tells their employee, when the boss tells their direct report, when the manager it's not this like hierarchical thing that dwindles down the chain. It says when team members remind one another when they are not living up to the performance, and therefore accountability is a form of respect, and peer accountability will trump managerial or top-down management every single freaking day. In strong teams, accountability doesn't flow that way. It doesn't flow from one manager to the employee. It flows sideways. It flows peer to peer. It's a field professional, a lead installer reminding an apprentice when they're not doing something appropriate. It's a dispatcher reminding someone they didn't fill something out. It's all across the levels of this organization, there are opportunities to find and expose mistakes. And that's great. That's great. Mistakes are good. That's how we learn. That's how we improve. That's how we get better. But when there is a failure to acknowledge those things, and look, like the way of like, let me tell my supervisor to tell my manager to tell that person's manager to tell that person to coach this person on they should have done this. What? Now, obviously, there's like things sometimes, like as the severity heightens, maybe that's when you follow a chain of command or get a manager involved. But when I think about like day-to-day operations and things we're doing, it's like it's the comfortability in knowing that we all have the same goal and we're all rowing in the same direction. And therefore, feedback is, to me, it's just a form of love and care. It means you care. Like, that's easy though to say. It's really easy for me to say it too. But like, so why do we avoid it? I guess is the question. I'll tell you why I avoid it. Fear is, I used to think it was like a lazy thing, like avoiding accountability was more about like people were being lazy. But it is discomfort. It's discomfort. That's why people don't do it. It's discomfort. We want to be liked. We want to keep the peace. Especially I think in close-knit workplaces like the ones that we have. The work we do is personal. We have laborers skilled labor going into strangers' homes. It doesn't get more personal than that. So reasons I think people avoid accountability, and remember, accountability is about ownership, not about discipline. There's the fear of conflict, which coincidentally enough is the second thing. I think Chad talked about that after I talked about the absence of trust. It's the fear of conflict. I don't want to cause drama. All right. There's the friendship bias, because, we work in a place where we're alongside shoulder to shoulder people all day long and we create relationships, and that's really great. But that's my buddy over there and I don't want to call them out. I don't feel good. Or there's low clarity, like what Chad talked about last week. I'm actually not sure what's expected, so I'm just not going to do anything at all. There's something that I coined the perfectionist bias, where it's, well, I don't do everything right, so who am I to call somebody out for doing something else that they don't do? And then there's just leadership and consistency, because, last week we let it slide. So were we really doing this? Well, last week it was fine. So this week, what's the point? I think the reality is that, like, when accountability disappears, something really subtle happens. And that is, the best people, the people that are competent and the people that are doing the work, they get super frustrated. And what ends up happening is the worst behaviors multiply. The people who care the most feel like they're carrying the team, and that just exacerbates and manifests an even worse situation, right? And meanwhile, the underperformance becomes normalized. Mediocrity becomes the status quo. Mediocrity, just getting by. I just, like, the HVAC equipment data, like, I can't not talk about this without talking about the equipment data, because it drives me nuts. Not putting in the equipment data on HVAC. And I would argue even for like water heaters too, right? It's like, it is literally like a variable that we use to help dictate the level of care, right, that we should be providing to a customer, right? It gives us a lot of really important information that ensures that we can provide premium service. And when a field professional doesn't put that information in, and then we retroactively wait weeks later, the message is, the details aren't that important, right? And when the manager does call it out 3 weeks down the road, the problem is that original field performers, the field professional standard now just became everyone's standard. It's funny, like, I've had turnover things where it's like, guys have complained to me about the equipment information being wrong, and then they'll literally go run a call and then not put in the information or not correct it. I'm like, what? Like, wait a second. Like, pot calling the kettle black. I'm just like, what do we, like hypocrisy, like the most tangible, palpable form of hypocrisy I've ever seen in a workplace. Another one that comes to mind is like when high performers don't follow a process. We're shocked when that field professional starts showing up late, has a bad attitude, maybe selling some work on the side, using their vehicle for personal reasons. It was like, oh my gosh. And it's like, guys, the evidence was there. It's like the breadcrumbs were there. I think the reality is like, it's something that I've really struggled with, is that, and this was like a hit to the gut for me, is I'm not going to go on a big tangent here, but I had an issue for about a year and 5 months, 2 days and 14 hours of my neighbor's dog. And unfortunately, like I thought this was communicated in a way, but there was opportunities for me to talk to these people, my neighbors, and tell them about it's really bad. And it's no longer happening. It's stopped because I got the HOA and the property management group involved. But in my mind, I'm like, I left a note over a year ago. In my mind, I'm like, hey, after the Kesha concert, when I think they had a little bit too much to drink and they were complaining about a glitter bomb that one of them set off, and I had a conversation with them, they might not have been that, it might have been a little incomprehensible, but I was like, I talked about the barking and the noise, and then nothing happened. And then more recently, when I tried to approach them, one of the times they ducked under the garage. So I'm like, I'm clearly being avoided. And then another time they saw me coming out my garage to meet them on their way back from their dog walk, and then diverted their path down a different street to then go into the front door instead of the back where the garage door was. And I'm like, clearly I'm being avoided. This means war. And I'm sending the email. And then she left a note on my door the next day that was like super condescending. And it's like, if you ever feel the need to be an adult. And I'm like, the same person that's gotten a fight about a glitter bomb after the Kesha concert is talking to me about how to be an adult? You gotta be kidding me. And in my mind, I was like, wow, I had taken the steps. And what was fascinating is like, I created a persona about this person when in all actuality, like the information just needed to be shared. And my life would have been so much less stressful in the last 18 months. And because you know why, in the last 3 days since that information was shared, albeit I regret how it got there, even though I had thought it had been communicated, the dog's not barking anymore in the stairwell that leads to my bedroom and driving me crazy. It had everything to do with discomfort and fear of not being liked by a complete stranger that I have no intention of interacting with beyond a hello. What was the Jim Carrey when he's like, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, the Truman Show. Sorry for all those out there. But what I also realized that was really hard for me is avoidance is selfish. Yeah, think about that. Like avoidance is selfish. Because when you avoid, it feels polite, but it's actually selfish because when we don't hold others accountable, we're saying that our own comfort matters more than the results. We're saying that our own comfort, avoiding the discomfort, therefore my own comfort matters more than the team's success. I would say this thing, I would call this thing out, I would acknowledge that, I would give that feedback, but that's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to prevent us from success. So what I'm selfishly saying is my comfort matters more than the team's success. My comfort matters more than the company's success. Think about that. So how do you overcome that? It's like, well, you got to have clarity. And I think like you got to have culture. And it's like, you don't just build culture overnight, right? You got to make it feel that it's got to feel like accountability can't be confrontation. It has to be commitment. That's what accountability is. It's not discipline, it's ownership. And really it's clarity, because when the expectations are funny, accountability always feels unfair. When you don't have the KPIs, when you don't have the goals, and that's something that I'm super excited about, because in 2026, in 2024, we said, and Chad talked about it, passive regression. Our field professionals have to have a scoreboard. They have to have goals. They have to know what good and great are. And we built that. And now it's like, well, what are ours? And it's really easy to look at a revenue number or look at a call booking rate or look at all these things. But at the end of the day, it's like we all need things that are helping us drive the standard of success and the standard of excellence and what good is. We all need to have KPIs. And I think that's something we're super excited about in 2026 to make sure we're implementing, because that helps actually build the foundation to remove the ambiguity and to create clarity. So then it never feels unfair. Because think about the people that bring in the revenue that ensure that we get to sit in a room for 30 minutes. That they got a scoreboard. And when they mess up, someone's bringing it up and it's talking about their average ticket or their conversion or their membership conversion or their warranty rate or the number of options that they're building or the number of yard signs that they successfully implemented or the number of reviews that they got. Think about that. They have this like scoreboard that's floating on them all day long. Well, what's ours? When expectations are clear, holding people accountable is fair and appreciated. And I think everyone needs to know what success looks like for their role. And that's the direction I think this group has to go to, because the idea I talked about earlier, it's like, it leaves clues when things are going wrong. Well, success leaves clues too. When we're doing things right, there's clues. And I think it's just importantly that like all those things like are a positive force, but it's like the positive things need to be acknowledged as well, right? And I think like the feedback ultimately just has to be normalized. And sure, it's like we can have one-on-ones, but if your one-on-one is living in what I called the first 5 minutes, I did this a long time ago. I said the first 5 minutes I like to call the bullshit stage, because it's when you do all the personal stuff. And I'm not saying the personal stuff is bullshit. It's very important. It is important that we get to know one another as human beings. But when your 5-minute personal check-in becomes the entire one-on-one, then you prioritize comfort over success, because you didn't want to talk about something, right? You didn't want to acknowledge, you didn't want to hold accountability. And so if feedback only happens when something goes wrong, back to that positive thing, then it feels punitive. And that's why accountability feels punitive, because we only talk about it when something goes wrong. And so I think that the flip side of all of this is when feedback is constant and it's positive or neutral or corrective, it becomes a part of the daily life of what we do as professionals. So we can't just do it when it's negative. Feedback is feedback is feedback. It's an opportunity for growth. And it just ensures that we're running the entire system the right way. I know I'm like 1 minute down here and I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have talked about the dog, but I really like needed everybody to know. Because like ultimately to me, I talked about like avoiding discomfort is selfish, right? But also like accountability is care. And to me, it's love and it's care. Because when you're giving someone that feedback, it means you care about them and you care about the success that they have and you care about the success of this organization. Leaders, like we have to model that too as leaders and what that looks like. And we have to ask questions to what Chad was talking about the other week and accept and implement and action on the feedback that we're given. Because the reality is that like when accountability becomes cultural and it becomes so embedded into what we do on a day-to-day, it stops feeling like correction. It stops feeling like punishment. It stops feeling like we're being nitpicky. And it starts to feel like commitment. It starts to feel like normal operating procedure, right? And when that happens, the fifth dysfunction, which Chad is going to talk about next week, which is inattention to results, which is interesting because we have a core value that is own results together. The inattention to results has no place to hide. Last thing I want to say here is again, I just want to hit on like the avoidance of accountability is one of the most dangerous dysfunctions because it is silent. It's silent. It's when you accept lower standards to happen. Any moment you accept a lower standard of excellence, you are giving in to mediocrity. You are establishing a culture of mediocrity. Anything you let go. We had a football coach that annoyed the hell out of me, but he's like, I got to coach somebody on every play. There's 11 players out there. Someone's surely doing something wrong or someone's doing something right. I'm going to coach someone on every single play, and it's no different for us. There's no argument. There's no explosion with this dysfunction. It's like the slow erosion. It reminds me of the hoodoos that I saw in Bryce Canyon that just got formed over millions of years of just, you didn't see it happen. And that's what makes this so dangerous. So here's your challenge this week. I want you to find one place where you're avoiding accountability. Maybe it's a field professional who's coasting. It could be a teammate who always has an excuse. We've all experienced that, haven't we? Always got an excuse, always got a reason. Have that conversation. And it's not to punish anybody. It's to protect the culture that we've spent so much time and dedicated so much energy to not only building. And so now the challenge is for us to preserve that. I want to end with a quote from Lencioni. Two things. Number one, I always love saying like, inspect what you expect. Well, the other piece that comes with that is What you permit, you promote. What you allow to happen, you establish the norm for that thing. What you permit, you promote. And to leave it at the end, Lencioni said, the enemy of accountability is ambiguity. The enemy of excellence is silence. The enemy of accountability is ambiguity, and the enemy of excellence is silent.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.